Back with another Miniforum mini PC, and this time it is the HN2673. It's one of the Neptune series models, and what makes it interesting is it does have dedicated graphics. Yes, finally, not integrated graphics. Although the integrated graphics is getting better, you still want dedicated if you can, if you intend to game, 3D work, video editing. You get the idea there. And it's got an Intel GPU this time around. So it's their Ark model, which is the A730M. It's got 6 gigabytes of DDR6 memory. Would be nice if it had 8, but we get the 6, and it's got RTX 3060 performance, similar to that. So yes, you can game in it, as I'll show you in this video. And it's paired up with a Core i7, the 12650H. That is a 45 watt part. It's got 10 cores, 16 threads, and a maximum turbo of 4.7 gigahertz. This configuration that I've got was sent out to me from Miniforums, and it does have 16 gigabytes of RAM. It's DDR4, unfortunately. 512 gigabyte SSD, runs Windows 11 Home, and it's got Wi-Fi 6E. So included with the mini PC, you'll find some little rubber caps here. They're for the connectors of the SATA 3 plugs. I'll show you those shortly when I take a look at the internals. We've got some screws here. There is this, which is our base you can use to prop it up. Now, the power supply, it's quite a beefy one because we've got a dedicated GPU in there with that Intel Ark, the A730M, and you'll see that the output of this is quite a bit. It's 240 watts. Now, it looks like a decent power supply. However, I don't like this design here of the cable, and I'll explain why. Because see here, there's already a bit of stress on this cable just out of the box. I can see it's been twisting a little bit there, and I can see that this is going to be a fail point for it. I don't really like the design of it. However, it's what it is, it's what we get with this unit, and it is using a standard connector, as you can see, so we could replace that. We get an HDMI cable and our power cable. This unit's relatively big compared to the other units, and you'll see why when we get into the internals of it and the cooling. Just for size comparison, this is the UM790 Pro that I just reviewed, and you see it's a lot smaller. This is what I would call like a standard size mini PC or the Nook units. This definitely a little bit bigger. Now they've got this mesh on both sides of it, so plenty of cooling. And down below in the bottom, this is where we would mount that little stand on there. And we do have 4 screws, which I've already removed, so you can slide off the 2 outside covers. So it's like a mini tower PC, the way you have it propped up like this. So in order to gain access to those internals, so here on this side, we've got the 2.5-inch SATA 3 drive bays. You simply just slide this off, lift it off like so, and you can see some of the cooling here, our BIOS battery, and we've got the 2 brackets there that have the screws and things to hold them into place. So there's the 2.5-inch drives. So you can add plenty of storage to this unit here. I believe it will be a great machine just for dedicated video editing. Not so much gaming, but I'll test that out, of course, in this video. And let's flip it and have a look on the other side here. So this one, the same. There's a little button there at the bottom too, you need to kind of push in. It slides off, and you can see now we've got, a lot of fans. And you'll see that one of the fans is missing a few screws. That's because I will remove this one. So they normally have 3 on them to hold them into place. So 4 fans, a lot of cooling inside there. And a wide variety of ports, which is great to see. So 2 USB type A's at a USB 2 spec. There are 2 USB 3.2 Gen 2s. We've got just display out here with the Type C, and this is a Gen 2 one. So Type C 3.2 Gen 2. And here with this particular unit here, you'll be able to run 4 displays, 4K 60, because we've got HDMI 2.0s, 2 of them both here. Sadly, not HDMI 2.1. That would have been great, but still we can get the high resolutions out of the Type C ports there too. 2.5 gigabit LAN, great to see that there. And I'll just show you the front of it here. 2 separate audio 3.5mm jacks. We have reset right there for the CMOS, and a USB 3.2 Gen 1 port here. And this is just data only, this particular Type C port here, which is USB 3.2 as well. And I believe that one is Gen 1 too, yes. And our power button status LED. Sadly, no micro SD or SD card slot would have been great on this, as I think this will be like a great machine for video editing as mentioned. Off the top and the bottom are just the ventilations. You can see those fins just inside there. So gaining access to your RAM, your Wi-Fi card, and SSD slot is a little tricky with this model. You're going to have to remove these fans, and we've got coolers and things in the way. And you'll see here by lifting this fan out, I've got the antenna, one of 2 antennas that's stuck to it here. We've got the power cable there to deal with, but I'll just put that to one side there. And you see here is where our RAM is. Just under this plastic, we've got our 2 RAM slots there. So you're able to upgrade the RAM. This model that I got from them comes with 16 gigabytes. So that's just 2 of the 8 gigabyte sticks in there. And the SSD, a little more complicated. That is a little bit buried. You can probably see it just down in here. Hard to see. That's the connector right there. So it's a little bit buried inside there and tricky to get access to that. Now what is interesting is we've got our CPU here, and then we have a MXM card. That is our Intel Arc dedicated GPU with its 6 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM. I've not seen an MXM card for so long now. One of my old Zeus laptops from way back. So good to see it's been used in a unit like this, and that's a proper dedicated graphics, even though it does have, of course, the UHD graphics from Intel with this unit. So there's a better look at the RAM. You can see we've got one SODIMM stick there, the other one's just below it. So you can just get in there. It's a little tricky to pull them out without having to start really just tearing down everything, which by the way, I won't be doing in this video. Sorry about that, but I want to keep everything as it is out of the factory. That's my reasoning behind it. And just looking at this unit, it will be a little bit difficult. I don't want to break anything. So both of these are DDR4 specs, so 3200 megahertz, not DDR5 sadly, which this chipset does support. But no, these aren't DDR5 RAM SODIMM slots there, unfortunately. Here's our BIOS, and it's a little bit thin on settings because look at this, advanced. We've only got hardware monitor, so you can adjust the fans. We've got our ACPI setting, so this is great if you're going to run it as a server. You want to set that to always on. And then system devices, well, you wouldn't be touching those. Power and performance menu, only power limits. That is it, okay? I would have loved to have seen the overclocking menu, which would give us then undervolting and also system agent missing. And it's under system agent, you can go into the RAM timings and tweak those. So we can't do any of that, and the undervolting would have been really great too as well. So unfortunately, quite a lockdown BIOS, which is unusual a little bit of Miniforums. Now, as you may know, that Windows 11 forces you to sign into your Microsoft account, and this is something I don't actually want to do. I just want an offline account. I'll give you this little trick here that I learned myself, just basically being silly. You type in 123@123.com and just hit next, and then the password is 123. And because so many people have tried this account, it will say, oops, something went wrong. So this is a great way to get around having to create or use your online account if you want to just keep it all offline. So the OS we get with this model here is Windows 11 Pro, not the home version. That's good to see. And we get most of the free available RAM. So under the device manager here, you'll see that the processor is going to show up here 16 times. That's because we have 10 cores, but 16 threads in total. There are 6 performance cores and 4 efficiency ones. So great to see that it's 12th gen, although 13th gen would have been a little bit better with the higher turbos. But that's what we get with this particular model for the price point and the dedicated GPU. I don't see it being too bad. So the disk drive, this is a Kingston, and yes, it is PCIe 4.0. And the speeds of it, I'll just show you now, they're not really amazing. The reads are, yes, faster than PCIe 3.0, but they tend to go with these lower grade, lower end PCIe drives, which is fine. And of course, if you want faster, get yourself something like the Samsung 990 Pro, put that in there and you'll get much better speeds. The 980 as well is another option, 980 Pro from Samsung. So that is good. Now the RAM, that is running in dual channel. I showed you those 2 SODIMMs. You can't really do much with this. This is a weakness of this system, as you'll see later on with some of the benchmarks, because it's not running DDR5 RAM, which the chipset supports. If it had that, performance would be a little bit better with higher bandwidths when it comes to the RAM. So the network adapters here, we do have the Wi-Fi 6E. It's the AX210 from Intel. Very good card. Signal strength, no issues, because they have an antenna at the top, one at the bottom, and I find the range reception to be excellent, no problems with that. And then under, you'll see our display adapters. This is the Ark. So it is the A730M. It's got 24 ray tracing units, and the performance is somewhere between a RTX 3060 mobile and RTX 3060 desktop. This particular model here is running at 95 watts. So we've got a bit of wattage in this tiny little small form factor PC for the cooling, and I'll get onto that later on in a little bit. So the benchmarks, let's go through some of those. So first up, the graphics. I think most people are interested in this first. Firestrike here. This is 3D Mark, of course. So the performance graphics score there is somewhere around that of a mobile RTX 3060, because I was wondering, what does this actually compare to? So that's the performance. It's about that. And here with TimeSpy, this got, I think, a very good score for the graphics. That is a desktop RTX 3060. So excellent there. That's better than I thought. I just assumed with the Ark having really no experience with these particular GPUs that I thought they would be a bit weaker than this. It's good to see that it's better than expected. CPU score, there's a little weak, and you'll see here with Geekbench 6. Score's a bit lower than I expected. I expected single core score to be over 2,000, multi-core score to be up towards more 8,000 something. Why is it a little bit lower? Well, there has been a little bit of throttling taking place. Before I get onto that a little bit with the thermals, last little benchmark here is Cinebench R23, and again, lower than expected. You'll see that the multi-core score here of the 8,000 points should be a bit higher. Now, it's the RAM as well, because it doesn't have the DDR5 RAM, but it's the throttling that's taking place. A little bit of throttling, it's lowering the clocks, gets a little hot, and that's why we're not seeing the possible performance you could get out of this unit could be quite a bit better. So thermals, I have been monitoring those, and just for over an hour here, unfortunately, I accidentally closed HW info, but it's the same story anyway. I've been testing this for a couple of days now. This is always going to happen. It'll get up to 96, even 100 degrees Celsius I have seen. Oh, there it is, 100 degrees Celsius. And it will pull about 48 watts maximum. This is the problem, thermal throttling. Now, the thermal throttling, for some reason, Miniforums has set it very low. It seems to be around about 75 degrees or even 80 degrees Celsius. It will trigger thermal throttling. Normally, most brands will leave that until 85, mid-80s, or maybe 80 degrees Celsius. But no, it seems to trigger quite early. The fan RPM is pretty good. It ramps up. You do hear these fans. They are quite a nice noise to them. They're not offensive like high RPMs at all, so that's a good thing. But you will hear from the Ark graphics from Intel some coil whine, but it's not at a level that I would consider abnormal. And let's have a look at what it gets up to temperature-wise, the Ark A730M here. Well, 80 degrees Celsius. So it's getting a little hot because I'm used to the NVIDIA GPUs normally being about 70-something or 68 degrees, but it's not bad. It's all good there. And you can see that the power, it did actually pull up to 120 watts here, even though if you look at the settings through Ark, it tells me that it's 95 watts. But it's 95 to 120 watts, so it's pulling what it can do. Oh, you can see it right here anyway, the power limit, sorry. And that's it already there too. So maximum clock it got up to is almost 1800 megahertz. So not a bad GPU at all, but what about fan noise? Here is a sample of it when it was gaming. What you can expect fan-wise. Now, the Ark is very good at decoding video and encoding. It has a media engine, so it's got AV1 support. We've got VP9 and HEVC, HDR, 4K. All that should not be a problem. So this file here, yes, it's demanding this MKV file, which is HEVC, 10-bit, 4K. Now, when I open that, you'll see there's just a couple of little drop frames at the start. Then it smooths out. Now, what's causing those drop frames is this media player. That's the culprit too. So if I full screen that, now looking at it, that is good. It doesn't seem to drop any frames now. So it's just the UI really that's causing those problems for some reason. And here playing a 4K 60 file, this again is looking very good. It's not lagging. And once I get rid of that UI, that's now 60 frames per second. No drop frames there. And looking very good. So it can handle all of those demanding media files that you've got. You can throw it at this dedicated Ark GPU. And this is what really interests me the most about this, is how would it handle video editing? So 4K, one of my old reviews right here, they're 100 megabit per second files, 4K in Adobe Premiere Pro, and see that it seems to be with playback. It's the Intel UHD graphics that's doing most of the work here with the CPU, and not our A730M, which is interesting, but we'll see if that's going to be used when I export video. So it doesn't seem to be used here at all for playback, at least with Adobe Premiere Pro. which is a surprise to me. So the performance in the timeline, everything with the quarter playback resolution is looking really good. And we'll have a look now at the export times for that 4K YouTube preset. How long will it take a minute of footage? So there we have the YouTube preset, 4K, the export. Now, I don't think Adobe Premiere Pro has this optimized for the Ark graphics, at least not yet. That's the feeling I've got. So we'll see what happens here. Start on the timer, export. I imagine it's going to be using QuickSync for this. And it is UHD graphics, and it is using the Ark. Okay, that's good to see. Only a little bit of it, but great to see that. So it is steaming ahead. We'll see how long this is going to take because it's looking good. Other mini PCs that are pretty powerful now, Ryzen 9 latest generations do this in about 28 seconds. And that was safe to say about 29 seconds there. Still very quick. And what I like about the timeline is the GPU, it doesn't really seem to help out, but it still seems to be fast. I don't seem to have any issues at all that I've noticed with the timeline. It doesn't seem to lag, at least at a quarter playback resolution. So I believe that this will be a good machine for video editing, thanks to the dedicated GPU. And onto gaming performance. This is Cyberpunk 2077, and I've got it set to 1080p for video. And for the graphics, I'm using the medium preset just at first to see how that's going to run. And the Intel Xe Super Sampling 1.1 is set to auto, and the sharpness. These are the default settings here, so I'm just going to leave that as is, and I'll jump into some gameplay. We'll see how it performs. They're looking good, 1080p with the medium preset. We're getting around 70 frames per second here. Personally, I would stick to medium at 1080p because, oh, look at that, it's dropping down to 50. So with decent enough performance, it certainly seems to be very playable at this frame rate. Now, of course, ideally, would love to have like 120 frames per second, but this is good. This is not bad. And again, it's similar to RTX 3060 mobile performance, around that, maybe a little bit less here, but still great for such a demanding game. And I think even with the medium preset here, this is looking pretty good. Here we have Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Now for this test, it's 1080p again, and I do want to set it to medium. Now you could lower this to low, but I want to see how it runs on medium, considering we've got performance similar to that of an RTX 3060 as mentioned, but more like the 3060 mobile 130 watt version. So this is the benchmark. I'll run that and show you the results. Not a bad result at all. 90 frames per second average at 1080p for Shadow of the Tomb Raider. GTA 5, this is running really well, high settings, 1080p, and we're getting over 100 frames per second. So that's great. And just around this area, the frame rate seems to go up. Depends on where I am on the map, of course, and how many NPCs and things it's got to render, but this is looking good. This is very playable. So for 1080p gaming, I can play pretty much every single game out there, as I just really showed you. So it's just a matter of tweaking those settings to get that frame rate where you want, according to more, I would say, the kind of monitor you're running to as well. If you've got a 144 Hertz monitor, well, then you probably have to lower down some of those settings just to make sure you're going to get and achieve that frame rate. So right here with the high settings, it's about, at best, 120 frames per second, at worst, around about 90 or so. But still, decent, good performance, great for 1080p gaming. Then Linux support, good news. Everything seems to be working, including video out from the Type-C ports. And here the wireless is all connected up. Bluetooth is there, volume controls seem to work, audio. And what I'm using, my distro here is Linux Manjaro, and I am using the open source drivers, which it seemed to have found a driver for absolutely everything. So that's great. Recapping here, so the fan noise is similar to that of maybe like an Ultrabook, not a gaming PC. Gaming PCs are definitely louder than this. Although it's got the 4 fans, the RPM and the fan noise is pretty good. I think it's not bad. But you do hear it when you stress it out a lot under demanding games and just workloads, exporting videos, benchmarks, things like that. You hear it a little bit. Now the thermals, it's something weird is going on. Miniforums sent a very low throttling point for the CPU, and I saw it being triggered in Intel XTU as low as about 60, 65 degrees C. Very odd. Normally that happens when they decide to throttle it a little bit. It would be set, the thermal with the settings, with the thermals, about 85 degrees Celsius. I don't know why they're doing that, and that's affecting the performance a little because this didn't perform as good as I thought it might. Now, it is only paired up with DDR4 RAM instead of DDR5, which is one of the cons of this unit. The other for me is there's no Thunderbolt port on this. That would have been nice to have, the Thunderbolt. It would have been nice to have another M.2 slot, but we do get the two SATA base head slots, so you can add cheap high capacity storage, which I think a lot of people will go for. It's an excellent machine when it comes to the gaming performance, somewhere around, as I mentioned, probably about 5 times in this video, but it's so you can relate. An RTX 3060 in performance, maybe like a 130 watt mobile card, about there, and pretty good performance if you game at that resolution. Now, video editing I found to be very good, very smooth. Definitely notice the dedicated graphics in this versus using some of the other mini PCs without it that are integrated only. You see that the timeline's a lot more fluid, less drop frames with it, and export times were better, of course, too. So all up, it has a few little minor niggles with it, but it's not a bad mini PC here, this one. If you need something a bit more powerful and you just don't want to go near integrated graphics, then it's worth the look. Even though, yes, it's a last gen CPU, it's still not bad when you factor in everything else, the price of it too. And if you're interested in finding out a little bit more, there's a link in the description of this video of the prices of it, which fluctuate, and the specs that you can get. They do range in RAM capacities and storage. So thanks a lot for watching my review here of the Neptune series with the Intel Ark A730M.